It is impeachment day. The hearings have begun with the former ambassador, Bill Taylor, testifying. And we were told at the beginning that there's not gonna be anything new really, but that was not quite true. We do have a pretty big bombshell, but before that, Donald Trump, how is he greeting the beginning of this public impeachment hearing? Again, remember, it being public is what the Republicans have asked for over and over and over. Trump greeted these new public hearings with "Never Trumpers." That's the whole tweet, and read the transcript. I don't know what the never, like just never Trumpers. Like usually to like manipulate a base, you have your little catchphrases or whatever, but you have to put it in some kind of context. Well, you can just say it. But like it'd be like if like someone just tweeted "Bazinga," but there's no joke, which often there wasn't. But you're just supposed to have something. You can't just say "Never Trumpers." Which? Why? When? I don't know.
I mean, that's, and honestly, if you listen to the opening statement by Nunes, who's the ranking member of the minority party, that gave the opening statement as a counterpoint to Adam Schiff, that's essentially what Nunes did. Whereas Adam Schiff very calmly, and I would argue too asleeply, did when he outlines here's exactly what happened. Then Nunes comes in and literally just says things like, this is a sham. The Democrats are the ones who lied to you over and over again about the Mueller thing, which was a witch hunt, and this is nonsense, ignore it. The president's a patriot. He just threw, it's a sham, and all those catchphrases together the same exact way. And it became very clear very early on that and then like petty little interruptions as an attempt to throw the Democrats off were the only arguments that they're gonna have. And in the meantime, if you wanna get to like how it unfolded, as Trump is doing this, Adam Schiff kind of just outlines it all, but then Bill Taylor comes out, and Bill Taylor is one of the most, one of the best figures I've seen in one of these types of hearings ever.
And look, it might be that Bill Taylor is the never Trumper that he talked about, but bear in mind, the reason Bill Taylor is here to testify is because he was back in the US government as of earlier this year. And the reason he was there is because Donald Trump forced out the previous ambassador over weird things that Giuliani had told him, and apparently Lev Parnas might have told him now in 2018. And then they begged Bill Taylor to come back and work for them, something that they're probably regretting at this point. But that's how we got to Bill Taylor. Now, Bill Taylor was obviously involved in the text messages. That was one of the early big bombshells that eventually led to the impeachment hearings. But there's new information as well. So here is what he said as part of his prepared remarks that he read from earlier today. He said, last Friday, a member of my staff told me of events that occurred on July 26th. While Ambassador Volker and I visited the front, this member of my staff accompanied Ambassador Sondland. Ambassador Sondland met with Mr. Yermak. This is, I believe, one of the closest advisors to the Ukrainian president. Following that meeting, in the presence of my staff at a restaurant, Ambassador Sondland called President Trump and told him of his meetings in Kiev. Or Kyiv, as they're saying in the hearings for some reason. The member of my staff could hear President Trump on the phone asking Ambassador Sondland about, quote, the investigations. Ambassador Sondland told President Trump that the Ukrainians were ready to move forward.
This is the bad news bears, Keystone Cops group of folks you're dealing with, where Sondland is on the, or what was it, who was on the phone? Basically, during the phone call, Sondland
called Trump.
Sondland calls Trump, but the idea that a staffer who's like waiting to hear back, you can hear in the background Sondland make a phone call with Trump and just have a conversation. Or is this a phone call? I'm sorry.
It's a phone call.
There was another thing where like the staffer said, yeah, the staff basically just hears this all go on.
Yeah.
And it's so loud that the staffer can hear what Trump is saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at the way he tweets, all caps. That's how he's an all caps kind of guy.
It is so stupid. Not to mention that there was a phone call, and people have been pointing out, like, by the way, if you do make these cell phone calls in Kiev, like
it's likely that they're being tapped.
It is essentially like just shouting it out in a public place.
Might as well, which they were also doing. So look, he meets with this advisor to the president and immediately calls Trump to let him know about the investigations. And look, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but the people who are supposedly experts say that ambassadors do not generally call the president after a meeting, and they definitely don't talk about very particular granular details of the negotiations. But in this case they did. presumably because it was considered important to Donald Trump. But there was one more graphic before we add more context. Following the call with President Trump, the member of my staff asked Ambassador Sondland what President Trump thought about Ukraine. Ambassador Sondland responded that President Trump cares more about the investigations of Biden, which Giuliani was pressing for. At the time I gave my deposition on October 22nd, I was not aware of this investigation. And this is important,
but yeah.
Information. This is also important because it directly contradicts quite a bit of what Sondland has said in his initial testimony. That was changed slightly when he updated it later on. But initially he said, I don't know anything about any connection between Biden and Burisma as of the summer months, but apparently he did because he was having conversations with the aides to the president and he was calling Trump himself to talk about it.
And every time you see Sondland, you should just completely disregard one of the central claims of the Trump defense, which is Trump is rooting out corruption. Do you know who Gordon Sondland is? He is a hotel dude from Portland who gave Trump $1 million for his inaugural festival ball and was just like made the ambassador to the European Union.
Are you implying that those two things are connected?
That happened. One of the other three amigos, Rick Perry, it was just proven that right in the wake of all of this going on, the reason that Vladimir Zelensky is the president of the Ukraine is because he pushed out corruption, right? And in the wake of all that, you have Rick Perry, it was reported by AP, Rick Perry shows up and is like, can you put one of my backers, one of my political backers on your advisory board? And wouldn't you know it, that backer is associated with a giant energy company that instantly gets a contract with the Ukraine.
Was it Hunter Biden?
It wasn't Hunter Biden, believe it or not.
It sounds like classic.
That's the kind of corruption that they want to, that they live in, that is exactly key to their survival as people in politics.
Yeah.
All of this just, and a counterpoint to that is Bill Taylor, who is they listed like West Point grad, received medals in Vietnam, war veteran. And who are you gonna believe? Bill Taylor, who like was brought in by Pompeo to please save us from ourselves, or Donald Trump, who hired a guy as an ambassador who gave him $1 million.
Yeah, and by the way, Bill Taylor, if you go back through what he's said, but also the text messages he's had, it's not like he was some never Trumper who was just like biding his time, collecting evidence to eventually spring on the president. Throughout this process, over those months, he was doing everything he could to get them to actually practice diplomacy and to not be pursuing these crazy personal goals of President Trump. He was trying to protect Donald Trump from himself. And for that, he's now being attacked. But yes, as you point out, the fact that Sondland is the ambassador at all is obviously corruption. It's the sort of corruption that we've just grown accustomed to in America. That's how a lot of these ambassadors are just big funders or friends of them or whatever. And honestly, at this point, if you honestly believe that Donald Trump cares about corruption disconnected from any personal electoral concerns, I'm shocked that you were able to turn on the device that you're watching this with, because that's crazy to believe at this point. Even in the phone call, the only examples he brings up of corruption in Ukraine have to do with conspiracy theories around Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. That's it. He couldn't even come up with one other company that he has concerns about, or one other individual, or one other investigation, anything. And after all of this came out, weeks and weeks have gone by, he still hasn't come up with one other example of corruption that doesn't have to do with his own personal political enemies.
And that's exactly, that's exactly what Taylor's pointing out. And that is exactly when Taylor said something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Is when that kind of stuff happened, when he started making it, and he clearly ties the withholding of aid to the pressure campaign by Trump and Giuliani that involves withholding funds for Ukraine. And in the meantime, both Schiff and Taylor set up the consequences geopolitically, the things that actually matter. He's saying like people have died, people will continue to die because Trump is holding, and that is the definition of corruption. Trump is holding up military aid, holding up things that we the taxpayers are funding, and in exchange, he wants something just for himself. That is corruption, that is the enemy.
And as many people have pointed out, quid pro quo, look, there's the actual meaning and then there's sort of the connotation. Like you getting something you want and me getting something I want, that I think is best described as a quid pro quo. But like when you like if you're hanging from a branch off the edge of a cliff and I ask you to do something for me before I help you up, it's technically a quid pro quo, but it's really extortion because you desperately need this thing.
And that's exactly what this is. This is precisely extortion.
Yeah.
He is getting something through pressure, and it is unethical the way that he's doing it.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for watching this clip from the Damage Report. For more content from the show and access to TYT Network members-only exclusives, go to tyt.com/Brooke. Wait, no, it's tyt.com/John. Go to tyt.com/John to sign up.